Hello and welcome to another episode of Wheel of Horror, the podcast where two best friends normally spin a wheel once a week and it normally chooses the horror film, but today we thought we'd do something different. So while recording over 300 episodes, we've talked to a few people who have actually met Ed and Lorraine Warren. The demonologists, which the Conjuring films are based off of, they're in the Amityville Horror series, they're a big deal if you know these movies or if you know the demonology world at all. So they're actually from Connecticut, and that's where I'm from, that's where Eric's from, and a lot of our guests are actually from Connecticut too, so they have some personal stories, and we thought we would share them with you today. So buckle up and get ready for 3 personal Ed and Lorraine Warren horror stories. And our first story is from Emily Banover. There is one thing that I kind of want to get into aside from the Babadook. So over the past year or so, we've had a lot of stuff about the Warrens. We've watched the Conjuring movies. We've watched the Amityville Horror. We all grew up in Connecticut, and the Warrens have always kind of been this I don't know, strangely intertwined with my life a little bit. My mom's going to tell a story about something that happened in 1989 with her and me, I guess. And then Matt talked a little bit about it, your brother, Emily. So I just want to know, do you have any stories or anything interesting about the Warrens that you've interacted with them?
Sure. I mean, they were pretty close with my mom and my godfather when they were interested in ghost hunting and, a lot of the demonology work that the Warrens were doing at the time, of sort of their peak. Like my family, like Matt has probably already mentioned or said, I've met the Warrens. They would come over to our house to eat, and I feel like I never went to their creepy shed where they had all their possessed different I don't know, collectible items from all their previous possessions and other people and hauntings and whatnot. So I never saw any of that, but they were over enough. And I must have been, I don't even know how old I was. I must have been between the ages of probably, I'd say 11 to 14, 15 years old. Matt might be able to tighten up that timeline, but yeah, they always were a really interesting couple. And I remember, because you guys know the house that I grew up in Farmington. It was
Oh,
pretty
yeah.
pretty fucking creepy, and it was really
Yeah.
old and big.
That basement was straight out of Freddy Krueger.
Thank you. I mean, well, yeah, so we live in this old creepy house, and I feel like my memories were always with Elaine. She was sort of like an empath in a way, where she would go into a room and she would just be like, oh, there would be a presence here. And it was never really normally when I was around. You would see her do that on her own, and or I'd hear about it from my mom. She'd be like, oh, Elaine and I went to this random house with the team, and Elaine, walked around and did her normal, ooh, this is cursed or whatever. And I remember my mom always talking about it. And I think Elaine was really, she liked whenever she did come to the house. I think she thought of all of my mom's kids. So me and my siblings, it's very benevolent. Oh, if you saw anything scary, you got to talk to us about it. And I want to hear what you have to say. So she was always, I feel like she'd always sit with me, because I'd be like, oh, I heard something or I saw something and it was really scary. And she'd be like, oh, it's not just that the house is old, Emily. You could be tapping into some kind of spiritual energy.
That's so crazy.
I don't know. She was a really fascinating woman. I don't really remember many interactions with him, but I always found it so fascinating
That's
that
so
she
cool. That's
claimed to
weird.
pick up on energy like that, or whatever it was that she sort of believed in. My mom and godfather, who were really a part of the Ghostbusters slash about that whole vein of just searching for the truth and the supernatural. They really bought into that, and I always was really fascinated by it, because she really did have a presence about her, which I thought was just so weird. And I was like, wow, maybe I just thought, oh, maybe because she's believing me, and I'm like, oh, I see ghosts, or oh, I saw something really scary, or I heard something last night. And I think she was the first person to be like, I totally believe you, and let's show me exactly where it was. And
Damn.
as my parent, or I should say, as my mom and Joe really got into it, the Warrens would invite random people, usually people who would claim to be either possessed or disturbed, or their homes would be haunted. Sometimes my family would be the family that's like, you know what, we can house these people and help these people. Ed, Lorraine, if you have any crazy possessed people, Send them our way. Like, we will house them so you guys can figure out what's going
Oh
on.
my
And I was
god.
like looking back on it, I'm like, this is so absurd. Like, I would meet some people that were clearly just mentally unwell, and we were just like housing them in our house or having dinners with these people. And
Um,
they were coming from all over.
I hate to break this to you, Emily, but I'm pretty sure
Yeah.
your house was haunted as shit. Now that you're saying all this, I'm like, so the
Oh
Warrens were
yeah,
multiple
definitely.
times. It's an old, like, how old is that house? It's got to be like,
It's in the 1700s. It has a plaque on it. It like can never be like torn down because of how it was like one of the first houses in Farmington. I'm pretty sure in our neighbor's backyard there was like a witch hung or something like absurd.
Oh my
jeez.
god.
Okay, all
Yeah.
right. That's there you go. All right, I'm never coming
Ugh.
over again for dinner. No.
Well, it's the house is sold. We have no stake
Yeah.
in that.
No,
Yeah.
that's great. That's so cool though. I mean, but no, to say like, hey, the Warrens were over on multiple occasions. Like, I think they were drawn to
Yeah.
that house too. I think they were drawn to your
Yeah.
house to some
Yeah.
extent, for
Holy
sure.
shit.
And that's why she's asking, like, did you see anything in this house?
Yeah.
Like, okay, that's really cool, Emily.
Yeah.
Thank you for
I
sharing all
know.
that.
No
Yeah.
problem.
Yeah, damn. That was that was way more
That's a
than I
lot.
thought.
That's so much
No
to
way.
take
You
in.
thought I was just gonna be like, oh, I shook her hand once. No.
Damn.
Wild times. Wild times.
Wow. Well, that was amazing.
That's a great way to
also,
end this
Emily.
episode. Now I'm got goosebumps right now.
That was scarier than the movie.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I've been to your house. That's
Damn.
why I'm terrified right now.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much, Emily. This was
No
amazing. Just
problem.
to talk about everything and catch up with you a little bit. This is great.
Definitely.
All right, so that was Emily Banover telling her Ed and Lorraine story. Now let's hear from her brother Matt. Well, last thing before we wrap up, we had Emily on a few weeks ago where she discussed the Babadook, but then she also discussed her experience with the Warrens, the Connecticut
Yeah.
legends.
This is Ed and Lorraine Warren. It's always a very interesting part of my life, and I think my family's life. Emily kind of alluded to it that my parents, well, specifically my mom and my godfather Joe, had spent time as basically real life Ghostbusters, and they were actually partners with Ed and Lorraine Warren. And I'm not, when I do talk about cinema and say that I'm a fan of horror movie, people are like, "Oh, like the Conjuring movies." I'm like, "No, not like the goddamn Conjuring movies." And not like any ghost movies. It's really hard for me to watch ghost movies, mainly because I've seen some really crazy shit and I've met some wild people, and they just don't do anything for me. I'm much more scared of like a different kind of movie, but I also love the casting in the Conjuring movies because, like, the casting of Ed as Patrick Wilson is like, oh my god, you'd be better off casting Danny DeVito. Like, he looks like that guy who's always in Law and Order. He's got the big bags under his eye and the gray hair. He looks like that New York cop,
Yeah.
the detective. That's what he looks like, not Patrick Wilson.
Right.
Yeah, and like Lorraine looks much more like a very tall, scary woman with like big poofy hair and circle glasses. Not Vera Farmiga or whatever her name is.
Yeah.
Like that casting just totally removes me.
Yeah.
But yeah, they would come over like pretty often, and I was like for family parties and stuff. It'd be like, "Oh, Ed and Lorraine are here," and we'd be like, "Hey, like happy birthday to us!" Like, this is what I wanted at my 6th birthday party: 2 exorcists.
Like, what would they even bring as a gift? Though he's across some
Just
holy water.
holy water. Like, you're gonna need this later. You'd be like, what the hell? Yeah, there was like times where I remember there was one huge exorcism that happened at my house where literally like we had like
Oh,
priests,
Jesus.
we had like priests, we had cops, we had Ed and Lorraine Warren, we had my parents, we had a film crew, we had like Unsolved Mysteries, like all these people
Oh
were
my
there.
God.
Yeah, for like this massive thing. Like I literally keep waiting for reference to my mom to like show up in these movies.
Whoa.
Yeah, you could actually Google or YouTube at Lorraine Warren and my last name on YouTube, and you'll see a panel of the 4 of them talking on YouTube. It's the most
Oh my
boring
God.
clip in the world. They're just talking about nonsense, but you'll see what they actually look like, and you'll see my mom sitting there. They're on some show and they're just raging. And yeah, so they were around for a number of years. But I always say that it's very interesting. I'm in a loving and long committed relationship now, but when I was dating, it was a very hard thing to bring up on a date because it's not something that comes up often
Right, right.
organically, but it is something where I'm always like, hey, fun fact about me, my parents were exorcists.
No, I mean, it is interesting. I'm sorry, really quick, what happened at your house when they did that exorcism?
Oh God, all the ghosts came and raged.
Oh my god, dude, your house is so scary, so I'm trying to imagine,
Dude,
like
there was this one guy who would come with the Warrens. His name was David. I'll never forget this. So this was a long, long time ago. So maybe even like the 90s, maybe. Yeah, this has got to be the 90s, like late 90s. They brought all these people over and they were down in our dining room, and there was like 10 of them, and they set up cameras all around the house to like catch all this crazy shit. And I'll never forget this guy David. He almost looked like Garfunkel, like just tall, skinny, weird dude. And he had come over a couple times also. And this time they were in the dining room and they were like, all right, here's what we're gonna do. And this was like my parents and Lorraine and like all these people. They were like, here's what we're gonna do. We're gonna split up. Two you here, two you here. You take the first floor, you take the second floor, you take the third floor, you take the basement. Everybody kind of break up, and then they're like, all right, David, you're just gonna kind of be the floater, kind of going through, making checking in on everybody. And the cameras are all rolling and everything like that. And when they go back to watch the tapes, they notice like after everybody kind of puts their hands in and they're like, all right, one, two, three, ghosts. They like everybody breaks
oh,
away, and David's kind of walking around the living room, and all of a sudden David just kind of like disappears, walking around the table, and then he reappears on the third floor, and nobody thought anything of it because everybody had split up. So it's just kind of like, oh, David walked in. And then when they were watching the videos, everybody's first reaction was like, ah, fuck, like the video cut off and then like went back on. And then they're looking at the time in the bottom corner of all the videos, and they're like, wait, no, the time is the same. And then they were like, all right, well, I don't know, that could have been doctored. So they bring it to forensic experts, and the forensic experts look at the tape, and they're like waiting to see, and they're like, all right, obviously somebody flicked the camera off. And then they're like, no, wait, the time. That could have been doctored. Wait, what about this? And they look, and on the table, there were two candles, and the wicks, the flames never stopped moving. And you could also see in the back and the traffic, the lights never stopped going. So this dude, David, literally just disappeared and reappeared
what the fuck?
instantaneously 3 floors else. And after that time, they kind of like met up and they were like, all right, well, we should bring David in. They never heard from him again.
What?
Yeah. And I distinctly remember this dude like watching a movie with all of us in the family room, and like he was sitting right next to me.
Oh my god, dude.
Yeah, man.
Fuck.
Fucking wild.
Jesus. This at your house in Farmington,
Yeah,
right?
oh yeah, definitely. So
Oh,
haunted. So haunted.
yeah, dude. That basement reminded me of the basement from Evil Dead,
Dude, that
honestly.
basement was literally one of the scariest places ever. And like for most of our lives, that basement was terrible. Like you never went down there. But then they went back and like they cleaned it up a little bit. And then that's when we started like watching movies and stuff down there. And I would only go down there in groups. Pax would go down there like at 1 in the morning and like play video games by himself. Like, what? Like you couldn't pay me to just walk down there in the
Oh my god.
daytime.
Damn, dude. Well, so yeah, what I'm gonna do is because like I'll tell a story later on the podcast, but my mom had a pretty weird interaction with the Warrens' grandson, Chris. And my mom played with a lot of Ouija boards and shit. So they brought her to a church somewhere in Connecticut that did Latin sermons, and they performed like a pre-birth exorcism on me or something like that. My mom was
What?
telling me. Yeah, so she's gonna get into more detail about it, obviously, because I wasn't there, but or I
Yeah.
was, but yeah. So I'm gonna find out a little bit more about that. Some kind of interested to see.
Yeah, holy shit. I'm so interested to hear what church because there's only like two or three, and one of them it might have been the one that we went to for like 10 years because that's how my parents got hooked into this was that we started going to that church and then they met up with the bishop and like they got hooked into all of this and he introduced them to the Warrens. So that's how it kind of all got connected.
I wouldn't be surprised if it's the same one, so I will find
Yeah,
out
it's
probably.
down in Monroe.
Well, I'm doing the episode with my mom. We're doing Dracula in a couple days. So, whenever we get it on the wheel. So I'll
Yeah,
be finding out more soon. So,
sick.
well, dude, thank you so much for sharing. That is fucking terrifying.
Absolutely, man. Absolutely. Gotta give the people what they want.
Oh my God, I did not know that, and now knowing I've been in that house, definitely a little more afraid. All right, that was Matt Bandiver's personal Ed and Lorraine Warren horror story. Now let's hear from my mom, Dina Lawless. Mom, you were going to tell your part of the Warrens story that we've been
Mhm.
kind of building here on the podcast with the Bandivers, and now you also have something, I guess that happened in what, 1989?
I actually have 2 stories.
Oh, great,
One that had to do with you and one that had to do with your little brother.
great.
The one with you is back when I was growing up, I was really into the occult. I mean, I would, play with a Ouija board or tarot cards, and I'd seen a couple of psychics. And then I got pregnant with you, and I started thinking, this isn't good. And we were friends with the Warrens' grandson, Chris, and he said that spirits and demons can attach themselves to you.
Hmm,
So I was really terrified that you were going to be born and you were going to be vulnerable to this.
Jesus.
So Chris took us down, your father and I, to Monroe, to this little church. And I can't recall the name of it. And there was a bishop there called Bishop McKenna. And we walked in, it was a tiny little church, and it was a Latin church. It was Catholic, but it was Latin. All the masses were said in Latin. And he gave me a little veil I had to put over my head. None of my skin could be exposed. And he basically said an exorcism over me. It was a
Jeez.
Latin Catholic mass, and that's what it was, basically to close all doors that I, had previously opened apparently, and, I felt better. I felt better once I left. I felt like you were protected and nothing I had done previously was gonna affect you, and yeah, it was pretty cool. It was pretty cool.
Okay, so were there other people there besides like the
Nope.
priest?
Nope, it
Okay.
was that night, and it as far as I remember, that was his church, and there were no other clergy that worked there. I could be wrong, but that's what I remember, and it was just this tiny little church. It was at night, and yeah, it was pretty wild, and it was an exorcism. It was
Jeez, yeah.
pretty wild,
I
yeah.
mean, nothing happened, I'm assuming. I know, like, lights or anything fell
Oh,
over and
no, no,
no,
no,
no,
it wasn't like
You're
the
just the son
movies.
of the devil, Alec. We hate to
Yeah,
break it to you
right.
tonight. Like,
but nothing creepy happened?
No, not at all. It was very
sorry, we
calm.
had to break it to you tonight. No, that's great. That's insane. That's insane. That's
Yeah.
wild.
You want me to
Jeez.
tell you the other one quickly too?
Yeah, yeah, please.
Okay. So the Warrens have in their basement, they have well, if you've seen The Conjuring, you know it. They have a museum in their basement where they have collected different idols and different things from their cases, and they keep it in this museum. Well, a few years ago, Jack was a baby. Your brother wanted to go to this museum. You could actually take tours of it. And I had been previously with Chris, their grandson. So I called Lorraine, and she answered and she's talking to me and she said, "Okay, how old, are the people that are coming?" And I told her, and she said, "I assume everybody's been baptized." And I said, "No, my son who's 6 months hasn't been baptized." She said, "Oh, my dear, you need to go out and get that baby baptized as soon as possible."
Whoa.
She said, "You cannot come here, and you need to get him baptized as soon as possible." Well, can you guess what the next thing I did as soon as I got off the phone with her?
Poured some water on his head.
St. Anne's. No, I called St. Anne's, and I made, an appointment to get Jack baptized. When
Jeez.
Lorraine Warren tells you, "Get your baby baptized," you gotta think about that.
It's
It just made
crazy.
me think, like, what has she got to lose? She's got nothing to lose by telling me that and having me believe it.
She probably just lost money by telling you not to come.
Exactly,
Right.
exactly.
You're right.
So it
Yeah.
just really made me think like, huh.
And then you think, what's the worst that can happen? He just gets, some water poured on his head and, gets some religious things said to him. So I should definitely do this, right? Like,
Yeah, and I wasn't going to, I wasn't gonna have him baptized, didn't really think much about it, but then when she said it, I was like, "Yep, we're gonna do
mm,
this, and we're gonna do it now."
Jeez.
Yeah,
Yeah. I am 99% sure that's the same church that the Bandivers were going to as well. Because I thought they said it
really?
was in Monroe or Madison. It was definitely an M town in Southern Connecticut. So I was like, and it was
Yeah,
all Latin. I think it's called Our First Ladies, I think.
I don't remember. I know it was Bishop McKenna, and he died a few years ago, but he worked with the Warrens.
Okay.
He worked with them when they did exorcisms and, everything.
Jeez. Well, we're gonna have, we'll have Matt on again in the future, so I'll confirm. I'll ask him, be like, "Hey, was it McKenna?" He's like, "No way," but we'll see.
Yeah, yeah, that'd be interesting to hear for sure.
Yeah. Well, Mom, thank you so much for coming on, talking about Dracula, talking about this crazy story. I'm so glad I'm not a spawn of the devil.
it actually gave me a good idea of like a film. Like, imagine like your best friend is the son of the devil or something, and it's just like, I still like you, dude. It's okay, like, or something like crazy, like demon-esque. I don't know.
Yeah, it's like Little Nicky, but like he becomes Little Nicky. He's like a
I didn't know,
teenager.
man. I didn't know. It's like once I hit puberty, everything got weird. It's
Yeah,
okay. Like,
exactly. I like it. My buddy the
yeah,
devil.
yeah, like My Little Vampire. Like, remember that movie?
Yeah.
With the